guys, it's Monica and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about my experience with an epidural birth versus my natural unmedicated birth. And you might be surprised to find which one I thought was easier. If you guys are new, I post new videos twice a week on parenting, healthy living, and life with little ones, and would love for you to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so I'm just going to preference this by saying that I am a no pain hero. I am not someone who can endure pain very well. I think I have a really low pain threshold and generally just don't want any part of the pain thing whatsoever. But here's the crazy part. My unmedicated natural birth ended up being my more comfortable and easier experience. And hands down, the recovery from that one was a million times easier. With both of my pregnancies, I was hoping to have the least amount of interventions as possible and was hoping to go unmedicated all natural with both. And like I said, I'm not one for pain. But through my research and preparation for childbirth, I learned that childbirth doesn't necessarily have to be this incredibly painful and horrifying experience that we sometimes hear about. And through all of that research, I just changed my perspective on how I viewed childbirth. And I'll be posting some more videos of the books, resources, and other things that I use to kind of reframe this in my head, as I had a lot of reframing to do. And I had a lot of reframing to do actually coming from a NICU nurse and just growing up in America where birth is viewed as kind of this inevitably painful experience. So with my first, I did end up having the epidural. And I don't regret that at all. I really believe that was the best decision for me in that situation. So I have a condition called POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, that is basically this dysautonomia that makes it difficult for me to stand for long periods, and I get activity fatigue, so I can't exert myself as much as I normally would be able to. And since I had this, I was monitored a little bit more closely just to make sure that everything was okay. And everything was okay, and I had a perfectly normal, healthy pregnancy. So besides the fact that I had that condition, everything else was normal. So like I said, I was hoping to have an unmedicated natural birth from the get-go, but my little guy was extra cozy in there and he did not want to come out. So at 41 and 3 days, so 10 days after his guest date, we made the determination based on testing that it was probably best to induce at this point. Needless to say, I was a little bit disappointed because this would make my natural unmedicated no intervention birth obsolete at this point. And though I was trying to stay positive, I was less confident in my ability to tolerate the birthing process because I knew I was going to be getting pitocin, and just from what I had read and researched, when you have pitocin, it makes the contractions a lot stronger and more intense, and it just changes the way your body would naturally handle it and feel it. And I know that there are people who can have pitocin and still go on to have natural births, but in my case, I really did find, having two different experiences, one with pitocin, one without, that the one with pitocin had a different level of sensation than the one without. To keep this video from getting too long, I will post their complete birth stories in separate videos if you guys wanted to check those out too. But even given that I was being induced, I still wanted to keep an open mind and just kind of see how things went. And I was planning to go as long as I could without any additional interventions. And by the time my induction date came up, I was already 3 centimeters, and I had actually been having contractions for about 3 weeks on a semi-regular basis. So my body was prepping, but it just hadn't gone into full-blown labor yet. So in reality, the induction was more of an augmentation since labor had already started in a way. They started me on a really low amount of pitocin, and for a while things were going smoothly. I was using my hypnobabies, and I'll make another video about hypnobabies. And using that, things were going fine, I was getting through, and then they became incredibly intense. And at the time, I could now see that this was probably not the best idea, but I got in the shower, and if any of you have POTS, the shower really exacerbates the POTS symptoms. It makes your heart rate skyrocket. Even though I was using a shower chair, it still kind of exacerbated my symptoms, and I started feeling super potsy, so then I had to get out. And then at this point, with the contractions and feeling potsy, and I was starting to do the kind of gray out thing that happens sometimes. And it was at this point that I was like, okay, I think that the best thing for me is to go ahead and get the epidural. This was about 8 hours after we started the induction, and so I calmly said to my husband, okay, I'm ready for the epidural now, and he was like, are you sure? And I'm like, yes. I felt that the contractions were getting in front of me, and I couldn't be in front of them, and I couldn't prepare for them. At this point, it felt a little overwhelming, and with everything else that was going on, I decided that the best thing was to get the epidural. I had my doula there with me too, and you know, she was very supportive and encouraging, and also just checking with me to make sure that this is really what I really wanted. I was like, yep, let's get that going. And to be honest, it was such a relief, and I was so happy that I had done it. I was like, oh, why didn't I do this hours ago? What is wrong with me? And it was just, you know, I felt like I could take that, you know, break and relax, and I felt much better. Fortunately, when they did the epidural, they did it really light. I could feel my legs, I could move my legs, I could get up and down, and I was just so happy that I wasn't kind of laid out and immobile. And by the time I got the epidural, I was already at 7 centimeters. So after that, things went pretty smoothly, and I was able to push him out in about 20 minutes, and that process was really easy. I did start to feel a little bit more pain and discomfort before I started pushing, so this is the second mistake I think that I made, and that was pushing the PCA, or the patient controlled administration button, on the epidural to get another dose, but that dose was way too strong, and then it ended up making me completely numb where I couldn't move anymore, and so that was disappointing. So the difference between that light epidural and the heavier one right when I was pushing was a really big difference. So after the birth is where it really separates most significantly, probably for me, between the unmedicated birth and the epidural birth. It's a stark difference. So my recovery was really difficult with my first after the epidural. After I had him, I wasn't able to move or walk or go to the bathroom, and I had to be wheeled in the wheelchair, and I just didn't like that experience at all. And my postpartum recovery ended up being extremely difficult. I was in extreme pain for 2 straight weeks and really couldn't move very much or sit down. It was just very uncomfortable. But overall, minus the recovery, that was a positive experience. For me, it was about having a natural, unmedicated birth, but it was also about being comfortable and having a peaceful birth. And in that situation, I felt like getting the epidural was the right decision for me. So now I'll tell you about my unmedicated birth with my second. So fortunately for this one, I did go into labor on my own, and that was at 40 weeks and 3 days. A little bit past the guest date, but still going into labor on my own. So I was really, really happy about this. And the only intervention that I had in this birthing experience was that my doctor broke the water 2 minutes before she was born. With this labor, I also used hypnobabies, and it worked really well for me. I was always able to feel like I was riding the waves of the contraction and able to stay in front of them. I was really calm and in that zone. I felt like it was a very peaceful birthing experience. And really, I was never at a point using the techniques that I learned that I felt like I needed it. I never felt like I needed it in this experience. And that's not to say that I didn't feel any sensation. There was definitely a lot of pressure, and there were a few contractions that were a little bit more intense than others. And you know, there were a few moments, especially towards the end, that were intense, but it was fortunately never overwhelming. It didn't feel like pain necessarily. It felt like my body doing what it was supposed to be doing, if that makes sense. So it was all really, really smooth up until the point that my doctor broke the water, at which point it was like crazy intense, and I was just really grateful that it only took 2 minutes to push her out. I had a really intense 2 minutes of pushing, but otherwise it was a really easy, smooth birthing process. The recovery was a million times easier. Immediately I was able to walk around and move and go to the bathroom and just feel like I was in control of my body. And that for me was just so much nicer. I wasn't in pain for weeks, and you know, I felt like immediately I was able to just move my body. Of course, I was still recovering, and it's postpartum. I just had this baby, and so it wasn't like I was my 100% normal self, but it just felt amazing to be able to be in control of my body like that. And then it was just a really empowering experience. I just felt so strong and powerful that I was able to have this experience and to have this be like a peaceful and comfortable experience for the most part. And it was just a really connected and happy experience, and I was fully aware of it. I felt everything, all those happy hormones I could feel, and it was just a beautiful experience. So overall, though it wasn't horrible by any means, it was a positive experience, but my epidural birth was a lot harder than my natural birth. And I attribute this to the induction, pitocin, and postpartum recovery. But I'm really grateful that I had the option for the epidural for that birth. However, if I were to have another baby, I would 100% aim for the unmedicated natural birth every time. Using hypnobabies in both very different births was extremely helpful in different ways. And I'll post about that experience in another video too. Okay guys, I hope this video was helpful and informative to you. I know before I had my babies, I loved hearing about other positive experiences, so I just wanted to share mine and hope that it's helpful. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.